Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, the Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change, Ed Miliband, has dropped his opposition to building a third runway at Heathrow Airport. He seems to be softening to the fact of Heathrow Airport expansion plan of having a third runway, having previously threatened to resign over the expansion in 2009 and voting against the plan in 2018. Is Labour and Rachel Reeves's determination to bring growth pushing pressure on the man who believes in net zero, or is this yet another U-turn from a member of the Labour cabinet? Joining me right now to discuss this down the line is Director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montford. Andrew, thanks for joining us tonight. Can you just bring our viewers up to speed in terms of what on earth is going on with Ed Miliband's net zero madness? Is he actually beginning to step away from this project, or is he instead pushing the pedal down?
I think he is trying to keep the pedal pushed to the floor as far as he possibly can, because he is nothing if not a green ideologue. But ideologues have this problem, is that their ideas eventually bump up against reality. And that's what Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are suddenly having to deal with. The painful fact is that the economy is in a terrible state, and there just isn't very much money to go around. So Ed Miliband has been pledging spending at the most extraordinary rate of knots. I mean, in his first 100 days, he was on pledging something like £500 million a week or something. I mean, it was just crazy spending, and that can't go on. The economy can't afford it anymore. So, I think the reality is he's going to be dragged kicking and screaming away from his green ideas, because the country just needs growth so badly.
Andrew, if I may, I mean, what are the costs of this project for the people watching this show and the people listening to this show? You know, what are the costs for the jobs that are being lost, the factories that are being closed? Do we have any way of calculating what the downside is of the net zero project? Yeah,
various people have estimated what the whole net zero project might cost. Most of them I would describe as greenwashing or whitewashing. Yeah, they're trying to hide the true cost. The true cost is probably going to be running to sort of 10 trillion plus, I would have thought. So yeah, it's completely unaffordable. We've already seen that electricity prices have doubled in real terms between 2002, when we started doing this, and today. Okay, we've been through the Ukraine war and prices soared. Mostly they've come back down again, but you can see what has caused the rise between 2002 and now, and it's mainly renewable subsidies and the cost of dealing with the intermittency of renewables. But there are all these other costs as well, things like you're forcing people to buy electric cars and heat pumps, which are more expensive. And the economic costs of those build up. The cost of energy being so high, we now have pretty much the highest electricity prices in the developed world, if not the world as a whole. Industry can't deal with that. We have already deindustrialized to the most extraordinary extent. Essentially, we've just shipped jobs off to the Far East. People have been flung out of work. So we've lost our aluminium industry. We've lost most of our steel making. Coal has gone. The North Sea is in a terrible state because companies can't see a future there, and people are losing their jobs. And for years we've put up with politicians saying things like, "Oh well, we'll have a just transition," which I assume just means they're going to put people on a training course, once they're flung out of work, and then nothing actually happens. And we've been living with this delusion for 2 decades now, and essentially, the cows have come, the chickens have come home to roost.
Now, one of the parties, Andrew, if I may, one of the parties that has been campaigning aggressively against net zero is Reform, who have been perhaps outside of the Westminster consensus on this issue. We've had some polling recently that shows the British public might be becoming more sceptical of net zero, more aware of the cost. Do you think this issue is going to be dragged increasingly into the mainstream of national political life? Do you think it is going to become a key fault line at the next election?
Absolutely. Reform, of course, are the only party who are united against this issue. The Conservatives, I think, will see Reform shooting up the polls and will go, oh, maybe we actually need to be more sceptical on net zero. But of course, they will find it very difficult to do that because they have a huge green lobby within their party. And, I think Kemi Badenoch's position is not secure enough to confront those people. But we see now that Labour are in exactly the same position. There is a growth lobby within the Labour Party, and there is an ideological green lobby, and the two sides, I think, are going to be at loggerheads. So I think Reform are going to make hay out of this because they are the only party that is united on the issue.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about the costs of net zero in the months to come, that's for sure. Andrew, thank you so much for walking us through this increasingly salient issue.